Game started.
Oh, okay, we got a game with blind from Uruguay. Okay, let's start out. Let's see, I played the ready last time. Okay, let's go ahead and play e4 again. I should play. I'm due for a d4 game, but, well, we're going to get an unusual e4 game anyway. Okay, so he's going for an early bishop g7. This is defended. There's no check along this line, so I can play f4 here. And then follow up with knight f3. Sometimes you can't play f4 because it just weakens the king side too much. But in some cases you can. And I think one of the ideas is that if you have time for knight f3 before one of these nasty checks comes in, then you can get away with it. In general, you gotta check the details. Okay, so this is going to be his strong bishop, so I'm tempted to play e5 here. But let's castle first. Let's set it up so I can castle. He could try e5 himself. e5, pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, bishop takes, knight takes. And I guess he can't play e5 just yet. So when I play e5, I'm going to give away these squares. The square on f5 and the square on d5. So maybe I will hold off on that for a move or two. Just keep these pawns in the center here. Think about where my other pieces want to go. Let's shore up the center like this. Aha. And then maneuver the knight somewhere. It's going to be a closed position for a while, it looks like, but I'm going to keep these pawns in reserve. I could maybe set up a pawn break on f5 would be interesting. Queen c2, f5, pawn takes, pawn takes, pawn takes, knight takes, bishop takes, queen takes. And his pawn structure would be a wreck after that. Aha. So, does he put a stop to that? I could still play f5 here, right? f5. He doesn't have to take. f5, pawn takes, pawn takes. e5, I take it. e4, I take it. Takes, I take. Okay, so taking seems all right for me. It gives me this advanced pawn on the f file, which maybe I could push ahead. I could dream of pushing it ahead to f6 at some point, but it doesn't have to take. But I could still dream of pushing it to f6 in that case, or exchanging it on g6. Like if this knight were just out of the way. So like knight takes, I could move the knight with tempo maybe. Knight takes. He takes with bishop, I take with the pawn. He takes with the pawn, I push the pawn to here. Forking bishop and knight. So this is a position where black has made a lot of pawn moves. If I can open things up around his king quickly, my pieces are a little more mobilized than his are. I can't tell at this point if they're really well coordinated, but maybe this knight could go into g5, and this knight could come to f3, and then this bishop would be free to come out. So it seems like potentially I could get my pieces in the game quickly, and this rook is already on the f file. But I have this is a little bit of a logjam over here. But his pieces, on the other hand, are not developed at all. So unless they just happen to be in good squares from the opening, it seems like he's in a bit of trouble from the point of view of development. Okay, bishop went there. I could play f6 anyway. f6 and the knight has to move, but then the pawn is hanging. I can win a pawn here on e5. Maybe I should do that. Now, the other idea was just to move the knight to c4 first, but then maybe he has chances, whereas if I just grab the pawn right away, that's a pawn in the bank. Yeah, he probably didn't intend to let that pawn go. Still, I think black was already in a bit of trouble. We'll see in the postmortem if that was true or not. The computer's pretty good at finding defenses and saying, well, black is really not so bad. Computer being all casual like. So if the knight comes under attack, I can move the knight to g4, hitting his bishop. And then this knight could go to f3.
Check.
Ah, he's got a check. I didn't account for that. But I don't see that it changes things. The problem is, because of his lack of development, he doesn't have the other pieces to come in with the follow-up. Like if there was a knight ready to hop into f2, this would be a different story. I'm still planning to play knight f3, chase that bishop off of that diagonal. And defend my other knight, which is loose at the moment. Can still go to g4 and hit the bishop, so it can still move with the tempo. And I can push f6 here too if I want to chase this knight away. But you have to ask yourself, is the knight going to a better square? Maybe not. The knight has no good squares, right? That's taken. That's going to be covered by this pawn. Ah, he takes a pawn. Okay. Time to think. Rook takes, pawn takes. No, rook takes, it's defended. So rook takes is not a great option. Pawn takes is probably my best bet. I still want to be able to play knight to knight to g4 here. And now I can. And I've got 3 defenders, and he just has 2 attackers on that. And then knight to f3, asking him what he's going to do with this bishop. This bishop is loose. The queen's on it, and he just needs to get one more attacker, but I don't see where that attacker's coming from right now. If he had a knight ready to jump on it again, he'd be in better shape. So really, his whole position just suffers from lack of development. And he's got to do something about his hanging bishop right now. Ah, he defends it, and he brings the knight in. Yeah, that's the right idea for sure. So I don't want to make his job easier by trading here and bringing that knight forward to a great fork. So I want to play knight f3 instead. And my knight is guarding this square here, the forking square. So after bishop takes, rook takes, probably is safe because he can't go here. Although he could. Okay, bishop takes, rook takes. He could play pawn to h4, trying to chase my knight away. And then how do I prevent him from getting this horrible fork? Huh? Yeah, so I got to think about this now. I have a check here. Yeah, so I should probably play queen takes. But queen takes loosens this bishop, and so then he gets a tempo move with the knight. So you have to look at all the places the knight could go. Interesting. Okay, how about rook takes, pawn to h5, knight here, check, king moves, and then queen defending the pawn. If he attacks the knight, I mean queen moves to d2, defending the knight. He can play he could play knight to one of these squares, attacking my bishop. No, it just trades. Okay, I believe this is safe because of knight h6 check after h5. Still buying me enough time to move my queen off of the forking square. Still have to worry about this bishop here, which would then be somewhat... No, it's not pinned because my queen is defended there. A bit tricky. Feels a bit shaky somehow. Knight there. Okay, moving the knight with tempo, attacking my bishop. So I have a check here. So let's go ahead and
check.
Play that. And see where the king is going. Okay. Now, what about this knight? This knight seems loose. He's got these squares, back where he came from. Those two squares are out and here. And defending him seems difficult. So let's chase that knight away. I don't like knights hanging around my king. I've learned. It's not good to have a knight hanging around your king. Maybe I should just have played knight h6. Knight h6 threatens knight f7 check, winning at least the exchange. And if he plays knight, if he can block that now by playing knight to knight d5. Very logical move. But I can increase pressure on the knight on d5 by playing rook d1. So knight d5, rook d1, and then where is he going? I'm threatening to just take it and win a pawn there. So, but if he goes there, defends this pawn, defends that square, and hits those squares. So this threat is still on. So what do I do if he plays king g2, king g7 rather? King g7, I don't want to just retreat the knight, so I'm thinking king g7, g4, hitting his knight. Now he takes, I take, and if he moves the knight, these squares are out, and the king is on g7. Yeah, so his knight is sort of trapped after king g7. And these pieces are still out of play, so this really ought to be good for me. Unless there's some amazing resource that I'm not seeing here. For example, king g7, pawn to g4, king takes knight, pawn takes knight. King takes pawn and queen to h4, f4 is checkmate. He just attacks the bishop. So now if I go here with check, he has to take, because if he doesn't take, I'll grab the queen.
Check.
So this wins the exchange and hits his knight. But now the knight can go to g7. So at least the knight has a square. Looks like he's going to let his clock run out. He was thinking an awful long time in the last move, so he may have been at a loss for good moves, but now he's going to have to play in rapid tempo. Okay, he's doing it. He's keeping up with the game. So do I have anything really crushing here? Is there an immediate win? He's hitting this pawn. So if I were to play a move like queen here, knight takes pawn, hitting my queen is possible. So I'm thinking, hey, just get the knight out of the way so I can bring my queen over to...
Black forfeits on time.
Yeah, I think I was in pretty good shape in this game. Up the exchange in a pawn or two. So, and with all my pieces out and attacking, and his pieces still back here. So anyway, I thought that was instructive for what happens when you don't develop. So I'm going to upload this game and do a postmortem as usual. See you later. Bye.